Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag. That's right, we're back again. We are an Italian travel podcast. In fact, we're an Italy travel guide. I'm Nathaniel Malor.
That was great. I loved it. I'm Darcy Melton.
I should never change it up again, though. I realized I confused myself too much towards the end.
I think I was also confused because I forgot to say my name. I was just excited that you did a little mix-up.
Well, I'm glad that at least somebody enjoyed it. I hope everybody else listening.
You mixed it up. You didn't do a mix-up.
I did a little remix for y'all.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about... That's the only fun part of the episode. I'm gonna let you know now. It's gonna be depressing from here on out.
We're gonna try to keep it respectfully light, though. We're talking about kind of heavy things, so we're not gonna be that silly, but we also don't want to really bum you out. So
that's a big goal of ours, not to bum you out. And we are going to be talking about. Well, let me say we've talked about why you should live in Italy. Mm-hmm. We've talked about the pros and cons. We've talked about how to live in Italy, how to find an apartment, how to buy a house, even how to get a visa. And then we thought it might be irresponsible to not talk about some of the pitfalls, or maybe some of the things to be aware of, some of the things you might not think about, and a lot of this I think comes from social media, whether it's like maybe you follow a lot of TikTokers or Instagrammers or influencers, there's the word, I knew it was something, or maybe it's just through regular media. I'm thinking like Under the Tuscan Sun, or maybe you saw just some sort of snippets of some movie, and you're like, that's kind of making Italy sound really cool. Or maybe, again, you came here for a vacation and you're like, I had the most amazing experience and I cannot wait to live there for the rest of my life. We just wanted to basically bring in some realities, I guess, and not in a way that would maybe make it so you hate Italy at the end of this, but simply to kind of adjust your expectations slightly, because it is an amazing place to live. It's an amazing country. It's, I think, maybe better if you come in having a better idea of what a reality is in Italy, rather than if you come in thinking it's like one thing and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, set your expectations.
And it happens a lot too, I will say, and as a little bit of news, it's not even news, but as a little bit of a update maybe, this happens a lot, I think, for students, because a lot of people who are younger, when I say students, I do mean those who are between 18 and 22 specifically, even though in Italy, a student can be any age and you can apply for the student visa at any age. It does seem quite common that younger people will apply for the visa, have only seen I've looked up Italy on TikTok, on Instagram, on whatever, and come here and be like, this place is not what I saw on Emily Goes to Paris, Goes to Rome, or whatever it is they're calling it.
I forgot, isn't it like Emily in Paris in Rome?
Something like that. It's fantastic. And so I guess we wanted to make this to sort of be especially for those people like you or people who want to live here, or just people who want to spend 3 or 4 months here and be like, is this someplace I do want to live? So again, we don't want to make this sound depressing. Basically, we want to make this sound, just I guess more realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we say all the time that this is the stuff that we tell all of you is the stuff we tell our friends, and these are things that we very much tell our friends and people who are looking to come here. It's just not, nowhere's perfect.
Absolutely.
There are sad realities to everywhere.
And then on that little news thing, I completely spaced, and somebody's probably saying, what was the news? Just that I wanted to let people know that it looks like I kind of follow all these Italy subreddits and things like that, just to kind of try to track what people are talking about and what people are thinking about. And it seems like a number of people are having issues specifically with the New York consulate. So if you're American and you're using the New York consulate, which I really think is only for New York. I think the Boston consulate is for most of New England and the rest of the Northeast.
Okay.
I say that because, again, we've talked to us a lot. There's only 6 consulates for Italy in the United States. So our consulate in Georgia is actually in Miami. But it's all to say is the New York consulate is a bit backed up in terms of trying to get an appointment for a student visa. So if you're trying to get an appointment and you're like, this is not happening, I thought this was supposed to be easy, it looks like you have to kind of just check the website 4, 5, 6 times a day to see if when they refresh and put out, because you need it looks like an application sort of date to come in and apply in person, or at least have an interview.
Like an official appointment time.
Exactly. Okay. So it looks kind of between a lot of people and a lot of bots who snap them up, whether I don't think to sell them, I think it's maybe mainly for our companies, quote unquote,
right,
that you can go through. And that also could be another option. But I just wanted to kind of shoot it out there that if you are looking for a student visa, that you are not alone in wondering what the heck is with all of the wait times.
You might not know the answer to this, but do you have to go to the consulate nearest you?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to go to the consulate in which, basically the consulate, you have to show where you live, and the consulate, when you do, will know where you live. So you
Got it.
have to unfortunately go to the consulate.
So
near where
someone
you
in
live.
New York couldn't go to the Boston
Unless they're a
consulate.
resident. They also happen to be like a resident
Oh,
of another
okay.
state. Yeah. Unfortunately, you have to do all your paperwork and all your
Yeah,
activities
that makes
through the
sense.
local consulate. So with that being said, I think that was all kind of like the news. I just wanted to kind of prep people. We have a fun episode last week about the Amalfi Coast. It's about the introduction. We're going to go again next week. We are still working through Darcy's residency visa, residency permit, permesso di soggiorno. That is a living nightmare, and we'll talk about that at some other point, because for those of you who are applying, you might just want to know that somebody else is also going through that same 9 levels of hell that
Yeah, I basically just live at the city hall of our small town now
you do. You have a
I'm
little
there
cot there and everything.
every day.
So if you like this podcast and you want to follow along, you can click that follow button. And if you'd like to check out our website, we're at onlyabag.com. Let me also know if you have any trouble accessing the website. We just changed. We were on Wix and we changed it to a different Wix plan or something like that, and it looks like it maybe broke something temporarily. So if you have trouble going to onlyabag.com or any of the pages, please reach out and let us know. We have an Instagram, Onlyabag Podcast. You can absolutely send us a message there. We've decided to keep it after all, and we're also on Blue Sky at onlyabag, because that seems to be where a lot of people are migrating to after the downfall of Twitter. And I think that's pretty much it for our social media, but yes.
Yeah, but we have an email.
Oh, of course we have an email. If you'd like to send us an email, we are onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like to leave a review, you can leave a review on Spotify or Apple. I think other places as well, but that's kind of the main ones. And last but not least, if you'd like to support us in a financial sense with money, you can do so. We are accepting your money. You can go to ko-fi.com/onlyabag. There's a link in the description, and you can donate. I think the minimum donation is $1. You can't make it less than that, but $1 goes a long way, especially in a country where a coffee costs $1. So without further ado, let us first jump into the smallest of our 4 problems that we're talking, not problems, 4 realities we're going to be talking about today, which is freedom of speech.
Yes, or the lack thereof. We recently learned in the last few months a bit more about what freedom of speech looks like in Italy, and you may have also been seeing some news articles there popping up in American news and international news, I should say, in addition to, I imagine, Italian news, although I don't read that much Italian news. I'm not super at reading Italian yet, especially in the news sense. And so there are several stories recently that you may have been reading about Giorgia Meloni suing essentially people for, would you call it libel?
Basically, yeah.
So,
because it's, I think, written, so it's libel.
Yeah, okay. So, and these include people who are journalists, as well as just regular people writing things that are they're not even not nice. They're just comments about her, but she doesn't like them, so she sues them.
And for those of you who are following along at home thinking, who is Giorgia Meloni?
Oh, right.
She is the current prime minister of Italy.
Thank you.
Just wanted to throw that out there in case a lot of people don't know, which is fair because, I mean, you don't always know the leader of a country you might be going to visit, so
Right,
it's not
of course
necessarily
not.
that important.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're not like voting the elections or something. So, but yes, she is the current prime minister of Italy. And she is the head of the, we're not going to get into how politics necessarily work here. It is convoluted. You can ask
It's
5
so
people on the street and get 5 different answers. But essentially, she heads up the party called the Brothers of Italy. In Italian, it's Fratelli d'Italia. And it has its, you often see in the articles that it has its roots in a sort of a youth fascist sort of organization, which is true. And basically in the 40s, it was it bloomed out of a fascist movement, which we will talk about later, and hasn't gone that far away.
No,
I would
it's
say.
still happening. There's still some journalists who are being charged with libel.
I mean, no, sorry, the party has not gone far away from their roots.
Right, that's what I mean. But
Oh.
there are journalists who are being charged with libel somewhat recently in the last few years because they pointed out there are like youth groups of the Brothers of Italy who are being pointed out as being a fascist.
Yeah. And I think so that is again, that might not, you may be like, that doesn't concern me. I'm probably not going to go there and call her a fascist. Interestingly, though, I don't listen to the band Placebo. I've never heard of the band Placebo. However, there is a band Placebo. People have heard of this band because 5,000 people showed up to listen to them in Torino, I think 2 years ago, where the person who fronts up the band, the fellow with a nice face and the singing voice. basically said something to the extent of she's a racist, she's a fascist, and he said some other things that had swearing involved. And because this is a clean podcast, I cannot repeat it. But it starts with she's a piece of, and I'll let you fill in the blanks. That was okay. It was the racist and fascist that he was actually sued over because it was considered, I believe, slander because he said it out loud. And I want to say recently, in the last month or two, it was either settled or he was finally charged, despite the fact he's not Italian, despite the fact he was just visiting, et cetera, doesn't matter. And to further push your point, the specifically people within the Italian government are being, let's say, targeted, right, by journalists in the sense of you're doing these things. You are, I think, for instance, Salvini took a lot of fire appropriately when he was trying to not accept immigrants. So he was like, maybe we can just turn the boats away. Maybe we can just leave them. In fact, he got sued by the government that he was a part of at the time for essentially doing that. And I think he was also sued by a lot of other people for doing that. But you can't necessarily call him out on that without first. It's one of those weird things where it's like you call them out on that. Even if it's true, they can still sue you for libel or slander, depending if you wrote it or if you said it.
Right.
And they're often supported. And it gets also a little bit weird because sometimes there's just name calling. There's oh
my God, the tweet.
The tweet.
There was
exactly.
a tweet that it was just a regular person who tweeted this, right? Or were
technically she was a journalist.
Oh, she was a journalist. Okay, so this is a journalist who tweeted essentially saying that Georgia Maloney is short.
Yeah, she's like,
it was some clip
you're 4 foot tall. I'm not afraid of you. I can't even see you.
Exactly, and she and they used the meter. I can't remember how tall they said she was.
1.2 meters, I think.
And she's about. People don't know exactly how tall she is. No, she's like 5'2", 5'4", so she's probably about my height. I call myself short, but Georgia Maloney was offended by this person calling her short on social media, and therefore sued this journalist, right?
I think under specifically calling it body shaming,
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think, settled or ended up being successful. But that's we bring these up, I think, to say that there are a lot of ways in which a journalist specifically are sued by government officials. And it's a little bit weird too, because they're not paying. It's not like, I don't know how this would work in the States, for example. Like if you insulted, let's say, the office of the president, are you sued by the Justice Department and you have to pay out the office of the president, not necessarily the president, but the whatever it is, like it goes into this Justice Department fund, or do you pay out the person? And here you pay out the person. So when you assault the person, you pay out the person. And it gets a little weird because on one hand, you have a journalist. On the other hand, you have somebody with the entire backing of the Justice Department.
Exactly.
And it makes it a really one-sided issue. And it's one of those things, too, that it happens. It's been happening for years. And we're going to get this later because Italy is still a very young country. And a lot of its laws are not updated in the times. Mm-hmm. And actually, and that might be a really good way to basically jump into the next one, which is blasphemy.
Yeah.
There, you might have heard, I think 2 years ago, 2022. So what are we in 2025?
3 years ago. Okay.
Three years ago, there was a food festival. Italians there. A lot of Italians are there, but one specific Italian man is there. He's drinking.
It was in Veneto.
I think it was in. I think it was in like Spoleto or something.
Oh,
it was some wasn't a big area, and he was basically having a glass of wine. He was enjoying the atmosphere, and somebody either poured water or beer on his neck, just as like a little joke. And which
is not cool.
Not cool. But he took the Lord's name in vain.
Nathaniel's doing air quotes.
I'm doing air quotes with one hand, so I don't know. That's like half an air quote. It's really half-hearted. 2 carabinieri, which are the military police, which here means police, essentially. They have police powers. I think military police in the United States are useless to arrest anybody who's not part of the military. But here, that's just the one of the police forces.
It's like police extra.
Yeah, exactly. They overheard him, and they charged him for public drunkenness as well as blasphemy against God. In 1930, I believe, Mussolini passed a law essentially banning blasphemy in any form. In 1999, that was pretty much repealed, except blasphemy against "quote-unquote" the deity.
Which is such an odd way. I don't know. That's an odd sentence to me.
Well, it seems like they're attempt to be inclusive. So, and I know that France had something very similar. They overturned it in 2015 after the Charlie Hebdo attacks because people were saying, well, technically that was blasphemous. Do we want also to have blasphemy? Like, how can you not charge them for blasphemy even
Yeah, if
so
you're going to do it,
basically-
it should be inclusive. Absolutely.
And so they repealed their own blasphemy laws. I think I want to say Germany, I want to say Ireland both have out blasphemy laws. Ireland was less successful in repealing theirs after the Charlie Hebdo attacks. Italy still has blasphemy laws, and again, it's against the deity, so it's just an inclusive thing. So essentially, if you're out swearing in public and you take the Lord's name or any deity's name in vain, you actually can get fined between 58 and 309 euros or something ridiculous. And I will say too, on this note, swearing is so incredibly common in Italy. Like, it's not a thing. Like I say that coming from the States, I think, you grow up and everyone's like, okay, only the uneducated swear kind of thing. Like, if you're swearing,
that's what
it's
other people say.
That's what other people say. I'm like, you're an idiot, but whatever. No, because I think everyone was to tell me growing up, like, you're only swearing because you're not smart enough to think of another word.
Right.
And I'm like,
I heard that a lot.
Shakespeare swore, so suck it. Okay.
But I think it's seen as so much more intense and sort of aggressive in the U.S.
Absolutely.
Anytime you swear, really. At least that's been my experience. But here, it's different. Certainly people swear more and it's more gentle.
Yes.
However, if you're doing official things, like if you're going to City Hall, don't swear. Be polite.
Yeah, we learned that the other day. Nathaniel learned that the other day. Sort of don't swear to people who are official, I think, is the fun lesson I learned. Which it seems like goes
your
everywhere.
mom and her partner won't swear in front of his mom.
Yes. I think that's a personal thing, though, because it's
Yeah.
also like we know other older ladies who swear.
Oh, for sure.
A lot. So
Yeah.
I think that's more of just like, she doesn't like it, but
It's just to say that I want to be clear that it's definitely not as aggressive here, the swearing.
For sure.
Or it's not considered as aggressive or as offensive usually. It's used a lot more liberally and kind of gently. However, there are situations in which you probably don't want to do that if you're trying to be respectful.
Absolutely. But I just want to throw that out there in case you're like, well, he's swearing about, like, swearing is not a thing here.
Yeah.
It is. So it's a very, and I know we're basically, if this is something that's also, I want to say, like, if any of what we're talking about is interesting and you're like, I want more in depth, can you guys do more in depth? Please let us know. We're trying to keep this really light and really add some brevity into it, if that makes sense. We're trying not to go deep into it because it does also get a bit depressing if you realize you live in a country
sure.
where you're like, oh, so if I say certain things in public, I might get fined. If I say certain things on Twitter, I might get fined. Like, again, because, a lot of these are journalists targeted, but sometimes it's not even journalists, it's just people. And it's people with a big enough platform that you can absolutely be targeted too. And of course, I will also say there is a massive push against these types of free speech attacks. Basically, people are saying that, you cannot have a functioning government that has no free speech. These are holdovers from a time of fascism, essentially. You can't, like, these are all holdover sort of laws from when you couldn't, at first, not even the fascism necessarily, but even before that, when you couldn't attack the king of Italy, and afterwards the Italian Republic. They're like, no, you cannot attack the institution of the Italian Republic. And then you couldn't attack, the dictatorship of Mussolini. And then now it's like, well, and it's kind of the same thing in in any country, I guess, when there's like a law that really one side uses effectively, and then I guess sort of political parties shift. And then this other side who's been like, saying, oh, that's a terrible law, but you have to strike this law down. And they're like, well, now we get to use the law in our favor. So it's like, right, nobody wants to strike down things that everybody can use in their favor if it's their time to play, if that makes sense.
Unfortunately.
I only say that because I know in the States, that's a big thing right now with, what's that fun thing when you split up a state or an area by...
Gerrymandering.
That's the one.
Which sounds like a rude word.
It does.
Hopefully that's not offensive.
I don't think it is. I think it's what
everybody calls it. Okay.
Yeah, but I think that's the one that it doesn't matter which party is in power. As soon as it flips, that party uses gerrymandering in order to make it so they will stay in power. And it's like nobody wants to just. How about no? None of that. How about no?
Everybody's cheating essentially.
Yeah. And we're also, I think, just because we want to kind of get into the other stuff, we're not going to also talk about. I'm going to mention it just so you all are aware that Italians. Media is called, or the main channel that most people watch is called RAI, R-A-I. There's RAI 1, RAI 2. I think there's like RAI 3, 4, 5, whatever. But main ones are RAI 1 and RAI 2. And if I'm not mistaken, RAI 1 is typically going to be headed up by the party that's in power, or RAI 2 is typically headed up by an opposition party. And these switch frequently. However, as you can imagine, there's all these sort of stringent laws on how much airtime they have to give to each party, how much airtime they have to give to each story, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as you can tell, when you're headed up by, a party that is sort of friends with the government in charge, you tend to basically push a little bit more things that are friendly to that government. Same thing, the opposition.
Yeah, I mean, it's government-run media.
It's literally state-run media.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is, and it does what its name says it does.
And when we say literally, we don't mean like figuratively literally. We mean literally. Italy, like a lot of other countries in Europe, still has state-run things. Trenitalia is a state-run train company,
which is great,
which is phenomenal.
Love that.
Rai is a state-run media. There's all
don't love that one as much.
Yeah, and there's also state-run utilities and things like that. So there are state-run is not like a, I don't know, I think sometimes coming from the states, from the United States, where it's state-run, so it's bad. It's like, yeah, but I'm just thinking in terms of power, like Georgia Power. There's literally one company in Georgia that you can buy power from. There's nowhere else in Georgia you can buy power. So they set the prices.
Like electricity and things like that's what you're saying. Yeah, it's called Georgia Power.
It's like, well, we don't like state-run things. It's like, yeah, but we're okay when it's like a monopoly, apparently. We just don't like the term state-run. So anyway, I was just throwing that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to know. That's another thing that we learned recently. I just thought they were regular TV channels, like, the basic package TV channels you get. But
ABC, NBC, et cetera.
Yeah, they come with heavier baggage than that.
They really do. Yeah. So what is next on this fun dip down the little rabbit hole?
The rabbit hole?
Thank you.
I have no segue for this. We're just going to be talking about trash and corruption.
You know what also is just as much debris as people's dirty words? Dirty trash. No, I have nothing. I'm sure I could have gotten there, but it would have taken too long. We have to pause. But yes, trash and corruption.
So this is something that I think we were both unprepared for, and we say this all the time. We live in a small town in southern Italy, and you see Italy on TV and Instagram and all these things, and it's beautiful and clean and tidy and wonderful, and it's not always. Where we live has a lot of trash, just floating about in the streets. There's just litter. There's also big problems with dumping. Illegal dumping. Yeah, it's not like it's
state-sanctioned dumping.
Yeah, and it's weird because I think we've said this before. The way trash works is slightly different in each city and region, just like it would be in states. Like you put your garbage out on different days, and sometimes you have different kinds of recycling in different states. But here, basically, recycling is always separated out into 4 or 5 different. Like you have to do it at home, separate your recycling out into 4 or 5 different categories.
Just for clarity, recycling and all trash.
Yes. So you've like trash, and then plastic and aluminum waste, and then glass and
paper,
paper,
and then the compost,
which is great, and it works quite well. You have to put your one piece of garbage. You put out one category a night essentially, and people come by and pick it up. Great, that works wonderfully. But at the same time, there's a lot of illegal dumping, and often of larger items that don't go in regular trash, and everybody knows it's a problem, and yet it continues.
And one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this is we are going to start talking about the south of Italy some more. We talk about the Trento, we want to talk about the coast, we want to talk about where to go, off the beaten path, that type of thing. And it's almost like, when you kind of bring, like, I don't know, a friend over once to your house and you're like, it's not clean. You're like, no, I've seen a dirty house. We're like, no. Like, I straight up did not clean this house. Like, this is not me trying to be funny. This is a dirty house. Just prepare yourself. And like, I've seen dirty before. Like, no. It's a dirty house. So it's that kind of thing. Like, you didn't think someone was going to come over, and then they did. And you're like, I haven't cleaned in like a week or 8 weeks or ever. So that's kind of the vibe. I want us to be like, that's kind of like, it feels like if we're like, come to southern Italy, but like, just there's a lot of trash everywhere, and we're really sorry about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of part of this episode. And 4 things. First, I do want to mention that I know a lot of people, when they go to Rome, that is their first thing. They're like, oh my God, this place is trashed. It's actually, there's an article recently in The Guardian about the Pope, the new Pope election. That there's a better way to call it than that. But yeah, when they're electing a new Pope.
Yeah.
And how one person commented, he's like, it's the only time ever that Rome is clean is when there's a new Pope elected. So it's like once every 8 to 15 years, the city is clean, and then it's dirty again. And part of that too is, I know that a lot of cities have issues with, sometimes it's unions run the trash cleanup, and sometimes it's families of people who are organized by their criminality, and they run the trash pickup. And it can be a bit of a sticky situation. I know in Rome, often that's kind of that seems to be one of the issues you often hear about. It's just sort of, it's unfortunately like they can strike and they can do this and they can simply refuse. And then part of this sort of family slash union is that you can't use anybody else to pick up the trash. If it's not us, it's no one. And so it gets which makes sense. That's how obviously unions work and it should work. But this is a kind of undercurrent of violence, I think, in this one. I was like, oh, okay, I won't. So I wanted to mention Rome is probably, if you've been to Rome, you're pretty prepared. If you've been to Naples, you are like, mwah, chef's kiss prepared. You are ready to go. You're fine. You have seen the dirtiest South. The dirtiest South? What? That sounds like a drink. Ooh, it is a drink, probably. The dirtiest city in the South. And I'm thinking like the South of the United States, by the way. I was thinking it's like lemonade and rum and like some sort of punch. I was not thinking of the South end of Italy as a drink. That sounds so lovely, boring. Though. Right? So if you've been to Naples, I think you're fine, genuinely. That is like the cream of the crop for dirty cities, if that makes sense. In the sense it's the dirtiest city, not like the cleanest of the dirty cities. So I just wanted to throw that out there in terms of what to expect. But as you mentioned, in small towns, I think there's a lot of issues such as, and if you come, I will say, like, you're kind of like, why would I ever come to a small town? Sometimes you might just go to the beach if it's a small town on the beach. Sometimes you might go, if you're into kind of getting off the beaten path, as we talked about, and exploring. And our region has this, like, has a what is this? Not a cathedral, it's a charter house. Certosa.
Yeah, that's a weird word for it. It's not a conclave.
Convent, basically.
It's a monastery where monks once lived in sequestered. What's the word?
Yeah, in silence, sequestered. Yeah. So there's that. There's like near us is so people go to see this Certosa.
It's quite famous.
Also near us is a church and a cave. That's quite a lot of church related stuff, for being honest. There's also just caves, near us. There's a lot of like little things that people come and visit. So it's just one of those things when you kind of get off the beaten path, you do run into trash. And on that other note was the corruption. And we wanted to bring that in because, again, it's almost like we read articles and we kind of want to be like, oh, we should probably tell that to people because that's an interesting note. And this one's a little bit different, a little bit weirder. And in the last, I don't know, I'd say decade and a half, there have been more and more articles about it, thankfully.
About corruption?
Well, about the illegal dumping.
Okay.
And when we talk about illegal dumping, in this sense, we do mean the chemical waste. In fact, there was a recent article, again, in The Guardian, about a family that moved outside of Naples to a small town because she wanted her son to grow up with like fresh air. She's like, Naples air is not good. And like tragically, this 8-year-old son ended up dying a year or two later from cancer. And she was like, okay, maybe that's just like terrible luck. But it turns out, no, a ton of people in this town had cancer, or in this region especially. And it turns out, and it basically ended up finding that there was super high levels of chemicals dumped in the area. And even where we live, people, the same thing. It's like, wow, they were finding all these tumors in the cows and all these tumors in pigs and then all these tumors in people. And they're like, whoa. What is going on? So I guess it's like, this isn't going to affect you as a tourist. This what affects people over the course of years, or even months and months and months. Sometimes if it's a high enough concentration, it's not affecting us in a day-to-day thing, but there's a sense of apathy that we kind of, I think, want to warn people about. As you mentioned, everybody knows it's a problem, but no one really wants to be the first person to do anything about it, or even the second or third or fourth. And even like, if I may, like, so it was another sort of anecdotal story. My mom, like 8 years ago when she first came here, she was just like apoplectic one summer because it was a really dry summer, so all these little streams and rivers had dried pretty much to nothing, and you could see the bottom of them. And for the first time, it was just, you could just see all the trash, and she had no idea. I mean, like years and years and years of trash had been tossed. So she started this cleanup. It started with her and her partner, and by 2 weeks, it was like 40 or 50 people were there helping cleaning up every day. I think they found a gun at one point that they had to turn into the cops. It was it was tons of trash. But the issue was, when they were done, they had already organized who would take the trash, but then that town did not want to take the trash. Like, that's too much. We don't want to take it. That's not our responsibility. The other town didn't want to take it. So they were left with like 50 or 60 bags of trash that everyone refused to take. And and this was actually literally just after the dump, the sort of municipal dump had closed down. And I think they ended up finally figuring out somebody to take it. But that was the other issue, is just like, there is a problem and no one wants to be responsible for that problem. So what ends up happening is, and everyone has this idea that, well, somebody will come along and fix it, but not if no one wants to be responsible for the problem in the first place, if that makes sense. Right. And it's hard. And I guess, like, again, I don't know how much sense I'm making to those of, I'm trying to be very polite about this, I realize, because, we don't want to just start hammering home on certain points, but it is
We don't want to trash talk.
oh my gosh, Darcy, that's 10 out of 10. I
Thank
even
you.
see that. I even see that. We don't want to trash talk. And we don't, it's like, should we pause? Should I deliver that instead? No, I'm kidding. I would
No.
never take that from you.
Thank you.
And no, but I think it's like people do visit. Like we used to work at an art residency and people would visit and they would love it, but they're like, so it's a bit dirty here. And some of that is just straight up like, as you mentioned, you put your trash out for the night and it gets windy or
It's
dogs get
hecka
into the
windy
trash
here, y'all.
or
Yeah.
and it's just like it happens. You have to like even in front of our house, we have to once a week sweep. There's always like cigarette butts or a pack of something, and it usually just flew out of somebody else's trash, and you have to sweep it up and keep it clean. And I don't mean like I don't want you to think too that's like knee-high trash. It's usually a couple pieces scattered here and there, but it's enough that like in the States I'd be like, oh, this is weird. I wonder if there's like a party here, a festival or something. It's like this is kind of a lot of
And it's not like you're like walking through trash. It's just like, you'll notice in like the corners of streets because they're very windy streets.
Exactly.
Like, oh, there's a couple pieces of trash that have, collected over there, or a squished Fanta can that's been there for a while. You're like, yeah, I should really pick that up, And then when you're walking around nature walks, I think that's what gets me the most.
Oh my gosh.
Like, trash will happen in the streets, like we're saying, because the way you put out trash here, specifically in our small town, and in most small towns, you just put your little trash bag on a hook so dogs can't get to it and things like that. It's not like in a secured trash can out by the curb.
Exactly.
It's not like that. So trash will fly out. That's one thing. But when you go for a lovely walk in the mountains or in the valley where we live, because the nature is so beautiful around here, and you look off to the edge and your eyes cast down, you're like, wow, we're up so high, so beautiful, wonderful. You look down and it's like a stove and a refrigerator and some other garbage and a shoe and like just a couple bags of random trash.
Sometimes used diapers. That's a big one. I don't understand that one at all.
Like they just like change the baby in the car and toss it out the window?
No, I mean like bags of used diapers. Like they've been collecting I'm like, what is this? Like,
weird. I've seen like single ones.
Did you not want to put that in your own trash? What is that about? Yeah, I didn't get that one at all.
And there's a garbage patch somewhat near us when you take that beautiful walk up the hill where we found a clock. We have a clock now that I pulled out of the garbage pile.
Yeah. And an espresso cup.
Which might be like irradiated. It's got that radium
we should not use it.
Paint.
To be fair, actually, on that note, in a different town, we were walking around, we also found a trash pile. And inside the trash pile, on top of the trash pile, there was a pristine pink espresso cup and pink espresso plate
it was so cute.
that we took and cleaned up and gave to somebody as a gift who loves it. And we did explain this from a trash pile. We're like, no, this was trash, but you really like pink things, and we thought you might really enjoy this. And they were touched, and they still use it. So I want to say, like, sometimes you do find treasures
in the trash.
95% of the time.
One person's trash is another person's treasure.
And usually it's just everybody else's trash.
It's just trash.
Yeah. And actually, like, I mean, I will say too, it's like, I love too when people come visit because they'll like show us pictures. Like, I found this toilet. And I'm like, yeah, no, I've seen that toilet. We looked at the toilet. It didn't fit the measurements we needed. It's actually, because, it's like, because people will take stuff out of their house, dump it somewhere, but sometimes it doesn't break. And you're like, that's a usable brand new toilet. And I know my mom's neighbor, for instance, he does a lot of stonework. When I say stonework, I mean like walls or like maybe the sort of tiles on the floor, as well as the tiles that run along the edge. And when she was redoing her bathroom, he was like, oh, you could just take, if you want, you can give me the tiles and I'll go dump them. And she's like in the trash? And he's like, no, there's a stream down there. I'll just dump in the stream. And she's like, so that's not where tiles go. And he's like, no, but it's fine. It's basically stone. And she's like, that is not where they go. But it was like this whole conversation. And she didn't want to be rude. She didn't be like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah, like, thank you, but no thank you.
But it was and to be fair, we're talking about guys in his 70s. And I mean, we've talked to people here. It's not an Italy only problem. I will say it's in France. It's in North Macedonia. It's a lot of everywhere. Some of it is I want to say cultural in the sense of like, I think it was in North Macedonia. Maybe we talked to somebody about it. Because somebody was saying like, this is new though. Like plastic is so new in terms of like, it used to be wood, glass, ceramic, and all of it could be.
In the town we used to live in across the valley, there is an ancient Roman garbage dump where you can find pieces of,
pottery. Yeah.
Pottery, yeah, not just like, they're not just around. You kind of have to do an archaeological dig for them, but they do exist. And it basically was an ancient garbage dump, but all they had was pottery, essentially. So it's fine. But now, obviously, we have plastic and horrible chemicals that are bad for the earth, and yet they still end up in the stream.
Exactly. And I think that's I think the biggest thing is that sometimes it is that sort of mix of apathy which I think is a big word in the South. It's just the South's most popular expression is domani, which means tomorrow. It's anything is tomorrow.
It's always tomorrow.
And it's just this, but this is, or kamafa. Like, what are you going to do? Kamafa.
And what are you going to do? You're going to clean up the trash.
What do you mean?
That's what we're all going to do.
I love this is turning into a complaint episode. I apologize. Everyone listening is like, I don't get it. Should we not go to Italy? You should still come. I will say too, and this is a good kind of maybe place to put it before we get into racism and fascism.
Woo.
Yeah, right. God. As outsiders, as foreigners, pretty much any foreigner, almost any foreigner, we'll get into that in a second, is given almost a sense of power. They're like, I mean, because we've run into this so many times where if we try to do something and we try to do it with an Italian, they're like, no, you should do it in yourself, because as soon as I try to do it, it's going to be a negative. It's just, I'm going to get a negative answer. I'm going to get a no. I'm going to get put down. I'm going to get, blah, blah.
There is a culture of putting each other down.
Absolutely. And I think this, some people think it's a Catholic thing. Some people think it's a Southern thing. We don't know. We have not been in the North. It might just be a Southern thing. It might be a Catholic thing. Even we were talking about recently, there was the sort of like, there's an expression, I can't remember the expression, but essentially it's who gave you permission to do that, or who's going to allow you to do that. Like when you tell somebody, I want to start a business, I want to do this, I want to go be an artist, I want to, run a bar, I want to be whatever. It's like, well, who gave you permission to do that? It's like, well, no one. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you my dreams. Like, well, you shouldn't have dreams. So I will say there's a lot of that sort of really deeply baked in, like this just sense of why even bother? But as a foreigner, when you come in, you almost get the opposite. And that's why, like, I think at the beginning of the episode, I said, like, as a tourist, if you come here, you get a totally different experience. You're like, people are really helpful and nice. It's like, oh, they are. Until you say you live in Italy. And then they're like, oh, you live here? That was a mistake. You're going to stay here forever in this weird in-between, phase of not being Italian, but you're not foreigner enough to get help from anybody. But no, I think as a foreigner, it's when you do things, whether it's trying to buy a house or this or that or anything, it's just there's sometimes a little push from people to be like, we're going to help you because we want you to achieve your dreams because you're not Italian, I guess. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I don't know
like the psychopathy of that.
It is amazing. So these are fun little things to be aware of. But with that fun segue, racism in Italy.
Yep. So we are both, we know that we are very privileged. We are American and we are white. And also Nathaniel has a link to Italian citizenship. So we have so much privilege here. However, we know that not everyone does. And we especially wanted to mention this because in one of our most recent episodes, we did talk about how immigrants are sometimes treated. And we mentioned something about the fact about how we've seen people be very kind to new people in town, to immigrants, to people from other countries who are now living in Italy. However, the government is often not as kind. There's a big anti-immigration stance in the government. However, we wanted to clarify that and say that it is not perfect.
For sure.
Big for sure there.
Yeah.
We recently were talking with some friends about how some immigrants who have been in Italy for almost as long as we have. We are also immigrants. But anyways, people who have been here who were basically denied any apartments, even though they had jobs, they could prove more than we could.
Financially.
Financially, they could prove, we have a job. Here's how much we make plenty for rent. We can pay all of our bills. We're good people. Good young people. We're going to pay our bills. And a lot of people wouldn't rent to them. And so they had basically employers and previous employers who live in town who are vouching for them, saying like, these are good young people. They can do it and they're trustworthy and they're wonderful. Rent to them.
And not just that, if I may, but not just vouching for them that way, but vouching for them if they don't pay, come to me and I will pay.
Right, exactly.
Like if they default on their rent, I will pay for them. Like, and basically.
Still tons of people in our small town wouldn't rent to them. And yet, because we are white and American, lots of people have been willing to rent to us for a lot less, without being able to prove as much as these
without
kids.
Asking for like how much do you make or
right,
show
and
me
like
a tax
pay
return.
Stubs and things like that. Exactly. So it's just really obviously incredibly sad that is the state of things. So we wanted to talk about it.
And I wanted to, and this is a good place to add. There's a lot of caveats. I don't know. When it comes to something like this, because for one, these are two young men. One just recently turned 18. we were all very excited. But he's been here since he was like 14. And for a while, he was living at it's not a halfway home. I don't know the actual expression for it, but it's a house for
It's like
young
temporary housing for people under 18 who are new.
or immigrants, basically, so essentially they're all kind of housed together. There's a sort of a family. It's typically a family takes care of them, and it's usually 5 or 6. And there's a lot of like, from what we understand, there's a lot of leeway within that. It's like, you're not like their kids. It's not like a foster family. It's just somebody is, they will take you to the immigration office or whatever it is, or help you get a job or take you to school, things like that. And so he was recently aging out because he's turning 18. So it's like, okay, we have to, somebody else needs your spot, basically, like after 4 years, which is obviously very hard. And he was moving with another Egyptian who was also, had already aged out. And that was, that was a big thing, because they were essentially like, they have been in town for like 4 years. And so part of it is 100%. I mean, like, everyone's like, that's just, don't be weird and racist, guys. That's just strange. Come on. It's not like you don't know them. You know them. And I do want to add, because again, it's one of those things because you and I are struggling, I think, sometimes to understand the intricacies of is this just racism? I think coming from the States, it's one of those things that's like, you kind of grow up and like, it's probably racism.
And when you grow up somewhere, you understand nuance so much better. Here, I don't know the cultural nuances. If we were in Georgia, I'd be like, yeah, racism, straight up. And
I think the thing is, so I mean, on that note, is a lot of people will not rent to someone from Naples, the city. We are 2 hours from Naples, and everyone's like, they will leave your house trashed. They have no respect for it. None of it. I don't know if any of it's true, but there is a complete lack of trust and I don't know, just anything resembling like goodwill for people from Naples, because they still have this sort of this stigma about being, they're all mafia, they're all Camorra, they're all in a gang. And I mean, that's not true, just to be clear. So, but that still kind of follows them. I know for a while, Romania was like, a lot of people wouldn't rent to anybody from Romania. That was a big issue, especially in this town. There's a lot of
racism against travelers as well.
Yeah.
There are not very many travelers in the valley where we live, but still there is racism against them.
Yeah, like the Romani people. Yes. Yeah, not Romanians.
Not from Romania, and also not like Irish travelers, which I think in the U.S. that's who we think of.
No, exactly. So I guess again, there's not really, I guess there's not that much intricacy, but it's one of those things that people, on this note as well, we've talked about house sitting in Italy, and I think we've made it very clear that you will almost never, unless maybe in Milan or Torino or somewhere very metropolitan, very north, will you find an Italian willing to house sit their house to you, or to let you house sit their house, basically. And actually, we've even talked to Italians, and especially in Rome, we're explaining house sitting, and they're like, an Italian let you do this? I'm like, no. He's like, oh, I would never see an Italian letting you do that. I'm like, I know. There is a natural sense of, I'm not going to let somebody stay in my house without me. That's absolutely not happening. And
meanwhile, we were talking off mic about how so many, at least where we live, so many people will invite you into their home for a coffee and or just to show you their home, their house.
Oh my God, the amount of times.
Like, come look at my house. It's so beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, it's great. Do you want a coffee or tomorrow? Do you want something to drink? And then send you on your way.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily want you to stay in their house to house sit.
No, it's just like they're just showing off the house, having a little coffee. Sometimes it's lunch or something, but they're like, you want to come?
But coming from the U.S., I mean, I'll invite my friends into my house for sure, but people I barely know, I'm not going to show them around my home.
But I think and it's also, I don't know. It seems like I'm also kind of curious, because the au pair culture in France is huge. Obviously, the au pair culture in Italy, not as huge, because again, we've talked about this before. A lot of people have family that they rely on to help raise their kids. We've also talked about sometimes one of the reasons, many reasons, that the salary in Italy is not as high is in part because, again, this is coming from people we've talked to, is there's an expectation you're living at home.
Right.
So you're living for free. Your parents are either still working or they're pulling Social Security. So they're pulling Social Security and buying all the food. So it's like, what do you need money for? You live for free and you eat for free. Somebody else is doing your laundry.
Which is not a good system.
Oh, it's an
financially
awful system.
Lovely system if you want to live with your family for a long time, and that's, you guys really vibe. Love that.
It seems, but it's like, I think it's one of those things that, again, it's all these little cultural nitty gritties that get in the way, and also in this extent too, it's also going to be very, very hard, because these two young men that we mentioned from Egypt, they need a contract to live. Because they need, basically, how it works in Italy, very, 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 very briefly, you cannot have a residence in a place without having a contract that proves you're living in a place. almost no one in southern Italy wants to give you a rental contract. This is like, it's just an impossible thing to find. And in fact, we've talked about this on the student visa episode. I've seen this so many times. It actually, I edited at least 5 or 6 books about people traveling to Italy who thought, like, yeah, I'll get a rental contract and I'll stay there for 12 months. That's no problem. And no one, not on these like U.S., Italy expat Facebook pages or subreddits or anything, they're like, honestly, I'm sorry, I can't give you a contract. Part of it is because...
Or they will, some people in bigger cities will give you a contract, but will not one that lets you put your legal residence there.
Exactly. So, and a part of it is there's a cost associated for them. So they're like, I don't want to pay taxes. And part of it is straight up, they're like, then I have to tell the government exactly how much I'm making. And I mean, they know I'm renting out the house usually, but I can kind of like, well, I'm not actually making like 300 a month or whatever, when you're actually making 400. So that's $100.
And utilities are dependent on how many people live there. So if you're one person versus 2 people versus a family, the garbage utilities and like all utilities are increased. There, like you said, like city taxes and things. There's so much dependent on who is legally residing there that it's just very complicated and kind of convoluted, to be honest.
It is, and I think that's so again, this is all to say there is racism, and we're going to get into that in a second. It was just also sometimes what can look like racism on the surface might be other issues. So it might be, they don't want to rent their house to somebody who needs it for a residency visa because they're like, there's already on paper 5 people living there. In actuality, no one's living there. But those 5 people might live in the north where they don't want to make that their residence because they might only be there,
Because we've said this before, that the houses are usually passed down within a family. That is just how the system like legally works in Italy. So there might be 5 different people or even 8 different people who are legally residing in this house in a small town, but they all live in other big cities because they don't have jobs here. They're working as like, I don't know, lawyers and doctors and whatever in a big city. But their legal residence is here, so they all pay trash for this building. They all pay utilities for this building where no one's actually living because that's their legal residence.
And also it could be that they're trying to dodge some kind of tax by having, well, my primary residence is actually this small town, so I pay less
where
tax.
Taxes are lower, yeah.
But also could be that the apartment they're living in that city has a different legal resident who owns the apartment who's like, well, I can't make you a legal resident. I'm sorry, I'm living there.
Right.
But I can lend it to you, not even under the table. You can do like transitory contracts and things like that are short term, usually between like 6 months and 18 months, and you can repeat them, but just nobody can use it as their primary residence.
Right.
So it does, I will say again, this is where it's hard because like, is it just people being racist, or is there something behind it? However, or both. However, they just, again, as you mentioned, we're both white, so our experience with racism is very different. Most people just think I'm German, and then they say Guten Tag, and I'm like, I'm not German. And they're like, but Guten Tag, and I'm like, all right, Guten Tag to you too. I'm still not German. Everyone thinks Darcy's Italian, so it works out really well for us. But we have heard from other people that, and especially I will say people that are Black Americans, for instance, who have a very different experience, sometimes a very different experience like as a tourist than when they were living here like on a student visa. And like it's huge. When I was a tourist, everyone was like, oh my God, welcome to our country. And then a student visa is like, what are you doing here? It's like, you just said welcome. What happened to that? Why are you telling me to get out now? So there's a bit of a shift when it's like, I don't know, everybody puts on this like face because like, oh, you're a tourist. And as soon as like, oh, you're living here now. Oh, okay. We're not okay with that. And it does shift. And I think a lot of it is, again, I mean, it's the same. It's not like unique to Italy. Anti-immigration sentiment is sort of the same everywhere. It's primarily based a lot on racism, and which is why we're talking about it. It's also primarily based a lot on, I guess, fear and based on or fear mongering, I should say, more than anything else. And I know Italy is specifically there. They tend to be quite racist against mostly people who tend to be from, as we've talked about, Africa. Just like when we talked about this in the previous episode, how like when Italy is anti-immigration, they don't differentiate typically on paper if you're from like United States, Britain, Australia, Canada, or like, I don't know, Ghana, Sudan, something like that, where there's a lot of immigrants from anyway. They're like, no, we hate all immigrants. But then in reality, you get sort of like people from the United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, English-speaking places, but also Central South America. A lot of people have family there. A lot of people view it quite.
So you're definitely treated better. You're not
favorably. Yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, you're from El Salvador, you're from Venezuela, you're from Argentina, you're from Brazil, you're from where? I have family there. Oh my God, how that's crazy.
Or you're
And-
American. Ooh, America, New
Yeah.
York City, you have money. That's kind of what people, not to make fun of Italians.
That's 100% what people
That
like.
is usually the first two things that people talk about.
Yeah, you tell someone from New York, like, I have a cousin in the Bronx. Do you know them? And like, I do not. It'd be crazy if I knew your cousin in the Bronx.
I think people in the city mostly think I'm from New York.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
yeah.
not.
You're straight up from Georgia.
Yeah.
But there's also, to be fair, 2 Australians came to visit as artists, and no one knew where Australia was. So they're like, so is that like England? And they're like, it's Australia. And they're like, you sound like it's England. And they're like, it's kind of like, imagine
The opposite.
literally as far
around
as
the
away as
globe.
possible from England. And they're like, it sounds like England. So yeah, I think we're that's more of a provincial thing. We're in a place where people, I don't think, realize that there are other countries.
Well, yesterday we ran into a friend who is, I feel like he's like an ambassador for the town. That's not his official title,
100%,
but
yeah.
that's just kind of like what he does.
If there's anything happening in town, he's doing it.
Yeah. And so he was giving a tour to some people, just informally, just, hey, let's go check out the town. And there were 2 Japanese tourists, and he was stoked. And that was the talk of the town yesterday, that 2 Japanese people knew of Padula.
But it wasn't in his tour group. He was in a tour group with Italians, and they went up to a church and found 2 Japanese people there. And he was blown away. He's like, how did you find this place? And I'm like, because they know how to use a map, possibly. Oh my God.
Not because they're Japanese, just
Right,
because they're people. Yeah.
They're not from our tiny town where nobody clearly knows how to use a map. I mean, I love it, but okay, it's just a small example. We were once asking a friend, why is there no other food in this country? Like, we would once, like, just one night, we want to go out for like Mexican, Chinese, something, anything, French, Greek, I don't care, just not Italian. And he's like, well, why would we? We have the best food. Why would we serve other food? I'm like, oh my God, is this why the country's so broken? So that's a fun bit of slight sort of, it's almost like nationalistic. I don't know. So again, I want to say it too, is anybody who's visiting who's like, is there racism? Is there this? Is that? Yes. As a tourist, you honestly might not see it very much.
Right.
It's just because you're going to look like a tourist.
And you're also going to potentially be in certain touristy places
100%.
and you're going to be moving around a lot. If you're not living in a place for several weeks or months, your experience anywhere is going to be different.
Yes.
I do want to put a note that we read an article on Wanted in Rome. And in part of this article, a student was being interviewed who is not from Italy. I think she's American, but a student who is Black was being interviewed and who goes to college in Rome. And she said something that I found fascinating and very sad, that specifically when she wore her hair in different hairstyles, she was treated differently. So if she wore her hair in braids, more people thought she was African and treated her worse, not not hurting her outwardly or anything, but certainly more suspicious of her. There were like lingering stares that were uncomfortable and negative. Not that a lingering stare is ever great. But then when she wore her hair in maybe a more what they viewed as a more Western style.
She said straighter too, for what it's
Yeah,
worth.
like straight hair, essentially. Yeah. I imagine if she had her hair like silk pressed or something like that, people thought she was American more often than they thought she was African, and therefore she was treated slightly better. But still, she says she very much experiences racism against her in Rome because she's Black.
And I saw on that note, this is very similar. I think there's another Black American who was at a immigration office who's basically said the experience changed like on a dime when they looked at my papers and realized I didn't have a Ghana passport or a Nigeria passport. I had an American passport, and then they're like, wow, I got suddenly treated so much better. And like, oh, America. And it's almost, again, it's like, it's racism. And is it also like
it's nationalism as well.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, it's just, you just hate certain nations? What is that about? So there's a bit of again, that's the kind of weirdness. And I will say too, for those of you, especially especially in the north of Italy, there is a Chinese population. And there's not like from China so much as has been here for 70 years and who are Italian, who are like 3rd, 4th generation Italian, who are often constantly asked, where are you from? And they're like, here. What do you mean, where am I from? I'm from here. My parents are from here. My grandparents are from here. So it's a little bit weird that, I mean, I don't know. It's like, so sometimes it feels provincial. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's based on country. Sometimes it's based on look. There's young people who are obviously doing all these sort of trying to push for a sort of awakening, maybe for lack of a better word, to basically be like, we should maybe not look like idiots on the world stage when it comes to the fact that we clearly, have no idea what racism is. We should probably figure that one out. And but also, if a way, unless I'm going too fast, but I figured this is a good segue, is you might have heard and saw recently some of these videos about the fascist march. And when I say fascist march, I want to be very clear: black shirts, Nazi salute, the whole thing. The whole thing.
It is not a Roman salute. Just to be clear, it is never a Roman salute.
It is, yeah, no, for sure. That is ridiculous. I love that. I love that. That's the pivot. And
this goes hand in hand with racism. Just to segue,
it does. What I was going to say is there is so World War II for Italy and Mussolini, for example, that was a big colonist movement in Italy. They were like, we should expand the Italian Empire. Ethiopia, Eritrea, I think Libya, I think Somalia were like the 4 major countries in Africa. I want to say, and I could be wrong, Lampedusa, which is an island now in Italy, was not. If you look at the map, it's like a stone's throw off the coast of Tunisia.
Yeah, it's very much closer to Africa than Italy,
yeah,
for sure.
And of course, that's where a lot of basically the irregular migration is in Lampedusa, because as soon as you touch there, you can claim asylum. And it's really not that far off the coast of Tunisia. So it's like, right, maybe, don't steal land from other people. That would just be a thought. So that being said, that there is a colonial past that is not that far in the past, and even more strange. And this is kind of what we're going to maybe talk about. And again, if you guys, this is something that's interesting, you guys want to know more about it, let us know. We can actually,
because we are not going to go into all of the history of fascism in Italy today.
Feels kind of heavy.
Yeah.
But we do want to mention that people don't seem to remember that Italy at one point had a colonial history, whole colonial past.
And like you said, not very long ago.
Not very long ago. So, and I mean, we were at a dinner conversation, and it was kind of, and it finally actually, it was with an Italian and a Ghanaian, and both of them, we were trying to explain to both of them that Italy tried to colonize different countries in Africa, and they're both like, no, they didn't. And we're like, are you people like?
Which
I get
really
if you're from
sounds like
Ghana and you might not have learned about it, but like, yeah. But I'm like, you, the other person, you're from Italy. How did you not? And actually, somebody else in Italian at the table was like, no, we definitely did. What are you talking about? But it's this sort of.
But Ghana wasn't colonized.
No, but we were just explaining to him because he was like, I don't think you.
I was just thinking if you're from Ghana and you moved to Italy, you might not.
Well, it's probably not in the curriculum.
Yeah, exactly. That wasn't in your curriculum. But as an Italian, it should have been
100%.
That your country went and colonized and did horrible, horrible things to several different countries.
And so on that note is this. Basically, I'm trying to like kind of make it as encapsulated as possible. Italy did a lot of work in order to sort of preserve their image as the good guys, not in World War II, obviously, bad guys, let's be very clear. But in we weren't as bad as, is kind of like the stance they're taking. We're not as bad as the Nazis, we're not as bad as the other colonizers.
When we went and colonized, we were like nice.
Yeah,
and
we weren't like Belgian when we did that.
We were making them smarter. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
No, that's not what you did.
I know you guys are probably, I didn't think this was going to be a political podcast. Oh, we're going to get into it.
It took a turn.
No, but I think that's genuinely, that's the issue. And we've actually we have a friend here, he's Italian, and he lived for 8 years in Portugal. And he mentioned Portugal has a very similar problem. I've heard from people in Spain, there's a phrase for it, I cannot remember, after Franco. And it's something about like the where basically in Italy too, they all agreed to forget. Where Germany went through the Nuremberg trials, and was like, okay, we should probably not repeat that. That was a mistake. That was a disaster.
And yet they still have problems with alt-right stuff.
For sure.
But yes.
But it's like, and I think there was like we let's agree to not ever do that again. I think Italy, and again, we can get into this more, but essentially, just as a very, very brief history lesson, went from at least the north was Republic of Italy, the south was Kingdom of Italy. Republic of Italy, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Point is, when Mussolini kind of took over, he took over essentially the entire country. King Emanuele passed over power to Mussolini to avoid a fight. Everybody hated that. Widely hated mistake. Everyone's like, are you an idiot? Are you dumb?
Never give in to dictators.
Clearly, awful, awful decision. And so when the partisans, during that, basically, Italy sort of gave up, quote unquote. They retire from a war. What do you do? Surrendered. There we go. Oh, we're retiring. We're done. We're going to hang up the jersey.
We're going to go take a nap, you guys.
Yeah, this is plenty. So I think in 1943, they surrendered. But that's essentially when this Italian Civil War started, because a lot of partisans who were basically republic, pro-democracy, anti-fascists were like, we cannot go back to allowing Mussolini to rule. This is going to be a disaster. So there was a lot of fighting for about a year and a half, 2 years, called the Italian Civil War.
And also from that came a very famous song, Bella Ciao.
Bella Ciao. And Actually, that might be before. I think Bella Ciao's the 20s. Is it 40s?
Well, there was the original song, and then they redid the words
Okay.
for the
Okay.
Partigiani.
That makes sense then.
I believe.
And so essentially, though, when the partisans won, famously having captured our dear friend with the bald head, Mussolini, on his way to Switzerland. I'm sure he goes by worse names than that.
Yeah, but he's not our dear friend, just to be clear.
Yeah,
yes, that was sarcasm.
The sarcasm for the story. Like the antagonist of the story was captured and hanged shot and then hanged upside down in Milan. Not a popular move, by the way. You think like in history, like, oh, people love that. People did not love that, by the way. Not at all. Milan specifically did not like that. Who's still well loved in Milan. And what happened right afterwards essentially is a swift bunch of court cases where the partisans set up essentially straw courts, maybe, like I think not real court. Like basically they wanted to kill as many people as possible. And I mean this in a, like, they were just essentially like, if we allow power to cede back, because essentially they were terrified they would lose the republic and that the king of Italy would rule the entirety of Italy rather than just the south again. And they're like, we cannot let that happen, because last time the king of Italy had a choice, he gave it to the fascists, and we cannot let that happen again. So they held all these basically super short, super just absolutely, I saw him, he's a fascist, okay, hang him. So essentially it was a bit bloody, and they agreed afterwards essentially to forget about it. Like, we're not going to learn about it, we're not going to teach it in schools, we're going to forget about it. But it's essentially, it was everything. It was, we're going to forget about the colonial past, we're going to forget about Mussolini's rule, we're going to forget about everything that happened. And when I say forget, I do mean, I think in Spain it was a little bit more like particular, like we're actually going to like not talk about it anymore. Here it was a little bit more of just like, we're just going to let bygones be bygones kind of thing. And we're just not going to talk about it. And that's, I will say, it's very Italian. Like, people do not talk about things in this country. It is the worst.
Yeah.
Not Mussolini, what's his other name? Berlusconi. He was once furious at RAI at the time because they were talking about the 2008 economic crash. And he thought he was like, that is incredibly irresponsibly talking about that, to be reporting on the 2008.
I think he used the word something like disrespectful or something.
It was something like that. And everyone's like, it's to report on the thing that's making everybody like, what are you talking about?
The thing that's very much affecting everybody in our country. We shouldn't be talking about that.
And then they voted him back in again. So there's a lot of
amazing.
Problems. It's amazing, but I just want to throw that out there. I know people, if you're Italian listening to this, I hope you haven't disagreed with us so far. But I was just going to say,
if you're Italian and you're listening to this and you have more information, please write in.
Yeah, we'd love to know. But I was going to say, when he died recently, Berlusconi died recently, and we thought people would be like cheering, and that was not the vibe at all. People were really sad, and we're like, "You're sad? Interesting take. Okay, I will not be as excited in front of you as I thought I would be." So I will just throw that out there. I thought people were going to be. I mean, people were cheering in the streets, to be clear, in other places, just not here. And so all this is to say, there's fascism. How does it affect today? There are still fascist marches in Italy. As you might have seen from these reports, the police were actually protecting them. They were there when somebody was trying to tear down all these pro-fascist signs on their own fence. The police stopped them from doing that. They're like, you cannot do that. When in one of these marches, there's a video. I think you showed me the video of this person playing Bella Ciao from their apartment balcony. The fascists started tossing up fireworks, identified who lived in the apartment, and pasted their name everywhere. There's a small bakery in another town that posted basically anti-fascist sort of. Yeah.
So on Independence Day, essentially, very recently, there's this very cute bakery in a smallish town, and they posted. I'll have to put the exact words in the description, but
basically, thank God we beat the fascists.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was something lovely. I mean, that's also lovely, but it was a lovely worded thing that was basically, we love Italy, we hate fascists, but in a nicer, poetic way.
To the point. I love
We're going to put it in the description because they said it much better than I did, but it was very nice. It was like not hateful in any way, really. It is what I think most people think people should believe. It's just like if you're saying on, I don't know, independence from Nazi Day, down with Nazis, we don't want them anymore. And then the police came by and said they had to take it down and that it was against the law. And, so they had this lovely sign out.
The bakery was like, what law? Tell us what law it's against.
So this bakery had this sign outside that said, like, basically, Italy's great. We don't love fascists. And the police came by, 3 different versions of the police, I believe. The Polizia di Stato, which is just like the state police, I think, is who it is. And then the Carabinieri, which is the military police, and some other branch of, I don't know, some local government-y thing came by and said, this is against the law, you have to take it down. And like you said, the people who ran the bakery was like, well, show me the law it's against, and then I'll take it down. Show me official paperwork telling me that I have to take this down, because this, I am allowed to do.
Yeah.
And it is pro-Italy, what I'm saying. You cannot tell me to take this down.
On that note, it's funny. And if you're from Verona, I'm about to trash talk Verona. Please let me know before if you're actually from Verona. It was not you, but I'm 98% sure it's you. There is somebody on Reddit, Italy Traveler or something like that, who basically, maybe it was just like on Reddit in general, who just posts like under pictures or whatever, went to a cafe outside of Verona, and behind the guy in the bar was a photo of Benito Mussolini with like flowers and the whole like, oh, like you put a saint up there. And he's like, is this weird? Is this a joke? Like, is this a joke thing? Is it a weird? I don't understand.
Are you doing this
What's
ironically?
the context? Like, yeah, I don't get it. And somebody's like, honestly, given where you were, it'd be more weird if there weren't a photo of Mussolini behind you. And it got in this whole conversation about like, that is a really strong fascist stronghold still to this day. They still support it. They still march. They still do the whole 9 yards. And I will also say at the same time that, because the partisans were created basically a group of a sort of everybody else, for lack of a better word. You had the Communist Party, you had the Christian Party, you had the Democratic Party, you had sort of basically anti-royalists as well. You just had kind of like everybody who wasn't a royalist or a fascist was like, let's just get together and kill them both. So there are still parts of Bologna, for instance, is called the Red City, mainly because it's made of terracotta, but also because it's very communist. It used to be a communist kind of stronghold, quote unquote. It's still very communist. There's parts of Italy where they named their kids Ivan still. Like that's a obviously not Italian name. It's a very Russian name. But I say that too because there are like, when you come from a country, I think we're not from this country. We come from a country with 2 parties. But when you come from a country, I think with multiple parties, there's this idea that multiple viewpoints will always be accepted. And I think it makes sense. It's how you create conversation. That's how you create, a dialogue. That's how you kind of bring people into the fold, because it's like, because so many people here are like, we agree on everything but this one thing. So because we disagree on this one thing, I'm going to make my own party.
Yep.
But we're
it's
probably
like
going to...
recipes. If you change one ingredient in a recipe, it becomes a completely different recipe and food. And it's also it has a different name.
Well, it's not like they hate each other. I mean, they're probably going to team up every time they need to team up. It's just like, but you still don't want to go with the party that's, like kind of, because I think the 5-star movement is considered a right-wing party, but they are very pro-environment. They believe that like healthcare should be free, that universities should be free, things like that. That like when you think of the American right, you're like, well, that's not what they believe. It's like, yeah, no, they would be a left-wing party in the United States. They have some weird thoughts about other things, like, but it's really just the reason for a while they were teaming up, I think, with a lot of these like Lega Nord and things like Brothers of Italy, is they all stand similar on, all 3 are anti-immigration. Right. Largely. There are other things they agree on, but largely that was a unifying point for them. But it's just interesting, I think, because it's like, so I think there is this argument that like, oh, well, now fascists have a seat at the table. I don't mean the Brothers of Italy. I mean just generally the fascist party still existing, people out there doing the salute, no masks on. I kind of like, I'm just like, so y'all just going to go to work tomorrow? There's like pictures of you online where everyone's like, oh, that's, I don't know, Giuseppe. Giuseppe's looking a little fascist-y.
But that's that apathy thing. It's just, I mean, I agree that we should all talk and you shouldn't be physically harmed based on your thoughts. However, if you're an extremist calling for violence against a certain group of people, you shouldn't do that. And you should be called out.
Right. 100%. No, and I think I think that's the thing too. I'm going to get this wrong. Somebody was talking about going to, I think it was Cambodia after their very bloody war. Not that far after, like, just 10 years later, but it's like people who were like once just like, slaughtering villages is now like a cab driver. And it's like, but you all just pretend to forget. And I think that's the thing in the North is like, you just, 2 weeks ago, you were going to pull a bullet in this guy's head. And then now you're just like buying, your deli meats from him as if it did not actually 2 weeks ago, but let's say 20 years ago. And I think a lot of this too, I want to just give out kind of some interesting dates. One, for what it's worth, the last king of Italy died in like, I think 1983. Not that long ago.
Nope.
His son died kind of strangely, it seems like, in like 2014. Strangely, I think cardiac arrest.
Oh, okay.
In 2004, but I think his grandchild is still alive. I just want to throw that out there. When we say the king of Italy who passed on power to Mussolini died in 1983. Not that long ago. Nope. Really not that long ago. Like, it was right there. Like, other things are happening in the 80s that were obviously also not great, but I'm like, it was right there. And then it's also basically, but even sort of the whole Mussolini upside down in the square was only 70 odd years ago. And I'm like, a lot of people, just, again, Italy is widely known as a country with a lot of old people. I'm like, yeah, there's a town near us that has the most people over the age of 100 in like this small population kind of thing. it's 1 in 10 people is over the age of 100, and there's only like 700 people in this town. So it's like a lot of people over 100. But I'm like, they were 30 when that happened, or whatever, 20 even when that happened. They were voting. They were either agreeing with or disagreeing with, and sometimes agreeing with or disagreeing with the whole killing Mussolini thing. So I say this too because I think sometimes when we come from the States, because I think as coming from the States personally, like our two biggest wars, Civil War and Revolutionary, for lack of a better word, those are like the big ones that everyone talks about as the defining moments in American history. That's like, oh yeah, their great-great-great-grandchild is there. World War II and World War I were big.
People hold on to that stuff.
That's what I mean, like the Confederate flags in weird places, by the way, like West Virginia. I'm 98% sure, because I read this recently, that West Virginia was actually created at the time because the governor of whatever, the mayor of the area, whoever ran that region, did not want to be associated with the South. And he's like, I do not agree with this. We're going to create our own state. That's going to be part of the North instead, because I don't like that Southern stuff. So my point is, it's just like, but even like, seeing a Confederate flag in California, and you're like, what are you, unhinged? But here though, and that's 200 something years ago. Here it's not. It's
there are still people alive who
they have their black armband in the attic.
Right.
There's a not here in this town, but a town over. There's a, I don't know what it is now. It's like an association building or something like that. But they have Il Duce above the door, which is the Duke, which is the nickname for
Mussolini.
And I'm like, but again, it's not so much that, I mean, it's not like a monument or anything like that, but it's like, but nobody's erased it.
It's just a remnant that nobody took down.
That nobody's
it's
like, we should probably paint over the Mussolini thing, right?
The fascism.
Yeah. So again, this is all to say, when we talk about you should come live in Italy, you should come live in Italy, there are weird picadillos. Some of them are just freedom of speech might not be as powerful. Some of them might be illegal dumping. Some of them might just be rampant fascism.
And racism, which go hand in hand.
And which absolutely go hand in hand. And I think that I also say too, again, just as we talk about how Italy is the home of fascism, it is also the home of anti-fascism. So, they do try to balance out themselves a little bit. Even before Bella Ciao, if you guys are interested, the Carbonari, not the Carabinieri, the Carbonari as in carbon, I think like 1800s is an original anti-fascist movement because like, no, this is weird. Let's not do that. I don't like this. This is weird. Don't like dictators. So Italy does have a weird little history of like trying to find a balance between, I don't know. It's like they can't find the middle, so they kind of do that sort of like, let's have the two extremes.
Yeah.
Let's just have the absolute extremes, and then we'll be in the middle right there. I'm like, that's not how it works, though. You just get a war all the time. But I will say that's a big thing a lot of people have found is that there's not been a conclusion, I think, to the. And again, this is as a perspective from an outsider. I want to be very clear. This is not a perspective as an Italian. It's just, I think a lot of places had a conclusion, well, not just to World War II, but maybe to their own wars, to their own civil wars, to their own atrocities, to their own violence, to their own genocides. There was a hearing, there was a trial, there was punishment, there was something, some sort of, resolution. And I think Italy did not get one. So, and even now doesn't really teach that much about it. And actually somebody mentioned, like, we have movies in Italy where the Nazis are the bad guy. We don't have movies in Italy with a fascist to the bad guys. So there's that kind of thing where
they just kind of skirt around the issue sometimes without addressing it, even though it's still going on. Like obviously what we're saying is there are still fascist marches, but it's not taught that, like it's not taught different perspectives on that. I'm not going to say that it should be taught that that's wrong. All the fascism is wrong, but it's just not talked about it enough. And it's, you're not necessarily taught critical thinking skills on these massive atrocities that happen. It's not addressed, and it should be addressed.
So that's, I think, the things to be aware of. Part one, if you're coming to Italy, no, I think, but I think these are again, I want to be honest, like you and I living here, it's weird. It's like weird skirting glances. Like sometimes there's not a rally, but like when in Rome sometimes, like, there's some loud people who want to get together and be like an anti-immigration rally. But the following weekend, there's 10 times as many people who are like, you shut up and go home. Just go back to your house, go back to eating your pasta. Just shut up. Just leave. This is not this is not about you and your anger. And with the fascism, it's like, there's for every fascist march, there's going to be someone's going to be hanging up an effigy of Mussolini, hanging upside down sometime in the middle of the night. Cause they're like, it's like the little, I don't know, there is a bit of a balance in terms of there's a fight on both sides, I guess. There's a kind of a pushing on both sides. And while there's a lot of apathy in the middle, I will say there are people on both sides who do try, there's people on one side trying to help, and there are people on the other side who just
stink.
Yeah.
To put it lightly.
But I will say, I don't want you to think there's only people who are apathetic or against you.
For sure.
There are people who...
There are people fighting against it who are kind and hopeful and want humanitarian things to happen.
Yeah, and I will, and as mentioned before, it's again, political parties here are weird, political stances here are weird. So when even, I think everything's super binary in the United States, it's anytime something becomes politicized, it becomes binary. You're for or against it, and there's no middle ground, there's no gray area. I think Italy and a lot of Europe, any country with multiple parties, there's so much more gray area, and it's so much more interesting because you can have anything can be gray area. Not, again, fascism, hopefully not gray. It's very black or white. Specifically, it's black because they like to wear the color black. But it's just interesting how you can get like a conservative Christians can also be against the fascist party here. Mm-hmm. But I think in the States, for example, not to get too political, but I'm like, oh, you're hearing your guy who's conservative Christian and pro-fascist, basically. Mm-hmm. And you kind of feel like, what do I that's my side, though. How do I not go with my side? But here, again, obviously... it's
not your side, but the person in that story,
yes, yeah. Sorry, this fake straw man person have created. But I just mean, like, in the sense of, it's interesting because here you can create a bit of a community, if that makes sense, or maybe an alliance in terms of, like, yes, I might not see eye to eye with that person over there. I might not, about their religion or about their stance on taxes or about their stance on whatever, but we can all get together and say, oh... okay, so I don't agree with those person at all. So I think that there's an upside to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
There's I don't know. I hope there's an upside to it because we're living here, and if there's not an upside to it, this is going to be only a bag in France real soon. You and me, Emily, we're going. And Darcy, you can come too.
I know. Why'd you invite Emily before?
Because she's already in Paris. I don't know what to tell you. She's already there. It's Emily and Nice.
All right, I won't be offended.
Okay.
Withering stare.
So with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to what was going to be one of our... We will also go back to talking about, like, just how to travel in Italy, by the way. We realize it's one of those things we keep talking to ourselves, and we're like...
For sure, but we didn't want to just give you all the fluffy, like, Amalfi Coast is wonderful. Try the Delizia Limone. Amazing. And then not tell you any of the other things that you might interact with, because it's always such a bummer when you think somewhere is going to be perfect and amazing and wonderful, and then you're hit with the reality, and that can just bring you down, you know? But if you're prepared for everything, not everything, we can't prepare you for everything, but if you're prepared for the good and the bad, then you're probably going to have a better time. And if you're moving here, at least you're prepared.
Yes.
We really want to say all of this to prepare those of you who we are encouraging to come live here and students to get visas and all of that. We don't want to give you all the just the cherry on top. There's a whole Sunday underneath that.
Yes, exactly. No,
and maybe you're allergic to nuts.
Or fascists.
Yeah, the nuts for the fascists.
Yeah, but also that people just sometimes sprinkle fascists on your Sunday. You just got to pick them off, throw them away, feed them to the pigeons, do something.
Yeah.
With that being said, thank you all so much for listening. We hope that you at least learned something and left feeling, if not totally devastated in the world, at least a little hopeful that people are trying to do something to help.
Yeah, definitely. And we hope you keep listening. We'll talk to you next Wednesday about potentially some other stuff.
And realities. We might even be talking about the new pope, because apparently tomorrow is when the election starts.
The day that this comes out is when conclave.
When you're listening to this, the conclave will have begun. We might even have a new pope, probably not, but it might be.
Yeah, we'll see.
Which would be a shame, because that means then Rome will be dirty on Thursday. That's a fun little full circle joke.
That was good. It was good. I appreciated it.
It wasn't great, but I appreciate that. Thank you. Your trash talk was 10 out of 10. So.
All right. I guess that's it.
Thank you all so much.